If you were a kid that had access to any sort of Mii maker, I'm sure you've made your fair share of ugly Miis. You'd select the silliest looking facial features and squash and stretch and push and pull them to their max. I played a lot of Tomodachi Life as a kid, and I'd still play a lot today. And while I, of course, had my fair share of copyrighted characters and family members and YouTubers on my island, I also had a really good amount of just random nonsense Miis. I think most players make these Miis because they find it funny to have a Mii that looks so exaggeratedly unhuman. The Mii is only there for the bit. But when I was a child making a lot of these strange, odd Miis, my main motivation was not that. My main motivation behind adding these Miis was because I wanted to see what their kids would look like. I grew up in a very white area where genetically we're all from the same 3 or so places. I also wasn't introduced to a lot of media that exposed me to people who don't look like me. And so, a lot of my Miis ended up looking very similar. But I didn't like that. If all my Miis looked the same, then the kid's appearance would be extremely predictable. So I added genetic diversity. I created Miis using traits that I didn't use elsewhere in my island. They did not represent any real people or characters. They were only there to create more interesting offspring. This weird little quirk I had when playing Tomodachi Life, this desire for interesting-looking Mii children, was turned into its own game, and that game is called Wobbledogs. If you have never heard of Wobbledogs, and you are intrigued by the description I just gave you, click off this video right now and go get it on Steam and play it yourself. It doesn't have a story, but I still don't want to spoil it for you. There are certain moments in it that I think are best experienced blind. One thing I will say, though, is that the dogs do die. It can be turned off in settings, but it's kind of a core mechanic. If you have any sort of trauma related to dog death, Wobbledogs might not be the game for you. Alright, okay, we can continue. Wobbledogs is a physics-based sandbox game where you take care of and breed Wobbledogs. They are these dog-like creatures with jelly slab bodies and unnatural coloring. When you first start playing the game, all of your dogs look pretty much identical. A normal-sized head, 4 legs, a pink rectangular body, standard stuff. And slowly, as you start crossbreeding these dogs and giving them more diverse diets, they start to change. A longer or shorter body, a larger or smaller head, a disparity in thickness or length between the front set of legs and the back. All the while, some weird things are happening. Dogs lay and hatch out of eggs instead of giving birth like mammals do. While they're growing up, they pupate and hatch out of cocoons. When a Wobbledog dies, it explodes into a bunch of tiny little pieces like Legos, and then all of your other dogs immediately rush towards it to cannibalize it. You can feed your dogs things that you should absolutely not be allowed to feed dogs, from obvious things like foam insulation and feces to more subtle things like raisins. I've seen quite a few streamers play this game, and I love their reactions to seeing the edible tag on the dog poop. They double take and then grab the dog they like the least and immediately feed it to them. I've seen multiple people who, while they're playing it, they think it's going to turn into some sort of horror experience. You know, like your Doki Doki Literature Clubs, your Tomato S's, but it never does. The off-putting stuff in the game just exists, and it doesn't do anything aside from being off-putting. Anyways, as you continue breeding, you eventually find dogs with some more extreme traits. Tails and coat patterns and more or fewer legs than normal. Eventually, multiple heads and wings. These are all very exciting things to spot, and the game rewards you for creating dogs like this through the achievements. You realize certain combinations of traits, like a small body and a large head, are hilarious. You push the breeding simulator further and further down to 0%. You're selecting for more extremist traits, and then you hit a point. You hatch a dog out of the incubator, and you find that it is completely incapable of taking care of itself. Your standard Wobbledogs, the ones you had at the beginning of the game, can walk from room to room, they can activate food dispensers on their own, and generally take care of all their needs. They will sleep, and they will play, and they will eat. But this dog you just hatched a few generations down doesn't do any of that. Maybe its body is too short and its head clips into itself and it goes into like this death spiral. Maybe its head and nose are so ginormous and droopy that it shovels all of the food away like it's a snowplow. Maybe the Wobbledog is really small and its legs are so skinny and spindly and long that it can't support its own weight. Maybe it doesn't have enough legs to walk at all. Whatever makes this dog the way it is, it can't feed itself. Your other dogs wander around and tend to themselves pretty well, but this one is stuck in one location. The dog doesn't want to play or sleep when it's hungry, so all of its meters deplete when you're not paying attention to it. You essentially have to hold it down and shove food down its throat. The dogs kind of freak out when they realize they're stuck, and this dog is in a perpetual state of sweating bullets. The wretched body you bred for this dog has put it in a constant state of stress and no play, and you recognize it for what it is. It's an abomination. A creature like this should not exist, and it wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for you. But not only do you not have all the achievements in the game yet, you also probably find this dog kind of hilarious. For me, this dog was named Young McDonald. He wasn't my first fucked up dog, I'm certain, but he was the most fucked up. He had every possible problem. He was extremely tiny with a short body that clipped into itself. He had those long spindly legs so he couldn't walk anywhere. He had a singular bug wing. And he had this big head with a very droopy nose that made it extremely hard for him to latch his teeth into any food. Oh yeah, he also had the unpettable trait. This means his fun meter was always empty because you couldn't pet him to cheer him up, that would just piss him off, and his body was too stupid to grab onto toys and play with them. He was measurably, observably miserable. And he was also my favorite dog in the entire game. It was an exhausting, round-the-clock job just to keep him alive, and no matter how good I did at that, he was never happy. That Wobbledog lived in a perpetual state of suffering, and it was my fault. I love that this isn't a horror game. I love that the game never tells you that what you're doing is wrong. I don't understand how anyone could play this game and not see the parallels to real-world dog breeding. I mean, it's obvious, right? We've done this exact same thing to real dogs. We push them into shapes that they're not supposed to be in, and it gives them a ton of problems. Pugs are the go-to example of this. We've bred them to have these extremely flat, short muzzles, and they, in turn, have a bunch of breathing problems. We have essentially closed their nostrils. We did that to pugs because no one told us we shouldn't. We just wanted to see how far we could push them. Wobbledogs as a game just lets you do the same thing on a much shorter timescale and with much more exaggerated mutations. It never tells you not to breed fucked up dogs. In fact, there's an achievement for breeding a dog with no legs. It doesn't have to punish you for doing the wrong thing. It just shows you the natural consequences of your actions. These dogs are miserable and absurdly hard to care for, and you have no one to blame but yourself. You aren't told a moral. This isn't like Undertale, where you do something bad and the game reacts to it. The only way this game reacts to what you're doing is with positivity through the achievement system. Instead, you teach yourself that breeding the dogs this way is fucked up. What you're doing is observing the natural consequences to your actions. The fact that the game gets more frustrating because your dogs can't take care of themselves, and the fact that your dogs are perpetually unhappy. The game lets you torture your dogs. You can feed them food that destroys their gut microbiome. You can create a fucking giant fan vortex chamber. You can reinvent the pug. The game never tells you to stop because the real world never told us to stop. We didn't have a deity come down and tell us not to make pugs. We just did it for whatever reason it may be, to satisfy our own curiosity. And the pugs not being able to breathe was just the natural consequence of us doing that. Do you see why I think this game is so brilliant? It teaches that lesson so subtly that it might not even consciously appear in your mind. If you play the game for long enough and you have all of the achievements, there will come a point where you say to yourself, Maybe I should just start breeding more normally shaped dogs so that they can move around. It will be easier to take care of the dogs if they are able to take care of themselves a bit. And without even thinking about the horrors of real-world dog breeding, you have reinvented the retro pug. You've taught yourself why breeding bubble-eyed goldfish is wrong. You weren't scolded for throwing the boomerang. It just flew back and hit you in the head.